Hello, everyone. Welcome to LectoraLIVE, your inside track into Lectora. We've got a great guest today. And we are back, and today we're joined by Jennifer Valley. She is very active in the Lectora community. She has a blog, and she is an instructional designer, and she's right next to me right here. Hi, Jenny, how are you doing today?
How are you?
I am doing great. In the pre-show, we were talking a little bit. I love her non-Canadian accent because she's from Michigan originally. And I was going, that sounds Canadian. Anyway, so you are now in South Dakota.
I am.
So how are the winters there? You went from cold to, is it colder in South Dakota?
There's a little bit of a trade-off. So the temperatures are definitely colder, but it's only because of the winds, the plain winds.
Right.
But the snow is considerably less. So I kind of feel like it's a good trade-off. Definitely the negative 30s is not really all that fun when you have to walk into work or drop off your kids at school. But for the most part, it's a better trade-off.
Negative 30s. That's good. That's when the dogs get stuck to trees when they go out. It's just a horrible thing. But
that might as well be Alaska.
That's right, because there's really not that much difference at that point. But that's only a little bit of the year. So, and other than that, it's gorgeous up there. So, how did you get involved with Lectora?
I started in content development, and that was the first tool that I was introduced to. We were brought on and went through a pretty extensive period where we had to learn the software. And then throughout the last 5 years, I've just been building more and more experience in it and courses.
That's great. Now you're lucky because you actually got into one of the best tools right up front. It really is a good tool. And what do you like about Lectora in terms of as a developer and the kind of work that you do?
Well, one of the things that I had mentioned when I did my comparison post is that Lectora is for the ambitious. It's for the people that want all of the options and they want the ability to just do whatever. It's such a robust tool that if your brain can think it, Lectora can probably help you do it.
That's true, and it does give you a lot of flexibility and power in terms of some of the things that you can get pretty creative with and not run into the bug problem or hey, that didn't work. Now, you also have something that's pretty interesting. You've got a blog that you keep pretty active. And in fact, let's show the blog. And there we are. So when did you start the blog?
I started in January of 2014, so last year. And it was one of the things that I had on my list of things that I wanted to accomplish, my goals for the year, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. And I had just been circling around in the community and saw all of these awesome people that were sharing content and thought, you know what, I feel like I have a voice and I want to put myself out there. So I'm only posting once a week, but I'm hoping to do it a little bit more in the future. But I love the opportunities that it's given me to create new content and research tools and make a whole bunch of awesome friends. I am a social media addict, and this is like fueling all of it.
That's fun. It's fun. And you know, a lot of people who don't blog don't realize it's a lot of work.
Yes.
Even though you think one blog a week, and that's aside from all the other 100 things you do. So it's a lot of work. I've done some blogging, and I'm never consistent at it. That's my problem. It's this between this and 3,000 other things. How do you get it going? But the blog is good. You've got a lot of good information on it, and I'm sure you are making good friends out of it because blogs do tend to attract people, and that's a good thing. So what's your primary focus when you blog right now?
I really like to talk to the person that's just starting out in development or instructional design because I feel like that's where a lot of people stumble. I've been in the field for about 5 years, and while that's nowhere near the 10, 20 year people, it's definitely enough to say, I've been around the block, I've made a couple courses, here's what I did wrong, here's what I did right, here's maybe terms you've never heard of. So a lot of that stuff focuses on them. And then the other part of it is that I have a real big passion in learning new technology, or just reviewing technology. So I really enjoy the opportunity to kind of dig in and get my hands dirty when it comes to a new release or a new feature, or just trying to show how I would use it in certain circumstances.
That's really good. And I'll invite you, by the way, right now, because the LectoraLIVE show has really two parts, but we haven't launched the other part yet. And we are going to be putting out, I think right now we've got about 60 or 70 tutorials getting ready to be done. But we're also asking people like you to generate and donate some of the tutorials so that we will introduce you, and then you'll do the tutorial. We'll have it recorded and we'll put them on so that more people can learn Lectora, because that's one of the things that there's not a lot of in Lectora, and that's just tutorials from everybody. So we want to make sure we kind of close that gap a bit. So, and then you could use the tutorial to also refer back to your blog and maybe get even more viewers. So that'll be kind of fun. So consider yourself invited.
Sounds good.
So now you're also an instructional designer. How did you transition from the role of writing the training to actually developing the training?
It started off as a slow process. I just had a supervisor who saw the potential in me and saw the drive and the passion, and that realized that I had the skills naturally in some aspects, and whenever I didn't have, I was willing to go out there and get. I'm an accidental instructional designer for sure. I originally started going to school to be a teacher, and about 3 years into it, the economy just started falling apart, and news programs were talking about layoffs and budget cuts and all this scary stuff that I wasn't ready to put myself out there for. So when I decided that this is what I wanted to do and this is where my passion lied, and I knew that I could do this and do this well, I just kept excelling until it got to the point where I started taking on those tasks past the development.
That's great. Now, as an instructional designer, even though, like you said, you've acquired it, a lot of instructional designers have acquired it. And I'm actually convinced that the instructional design program on the whole is probably not the right place to be, because it doesn't go far enough into where you really need to be. In fact, a lot of times there's no technology taught. And I know people with instructional technology degrees who know anything about technology. And you go, wait a minute, what's wrong with that picture? And I think that's just a fallacy or just a weakness in that kind of arena. Because really, to be an instructional designer, like you have to know your content. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people come out of school and they immediately go, well, I'm an instructional designer. Well, yeah, but what do you know about what your company does? Nothing. So until you learn about what the company does, we have to rely on SMEs. But often, and I've met, you've probably seen this, you probably do this, you wind up becoming your own SME. Mm-hmm. Because you know what the applications are, what the processes are, and that's good. I always feel sorry for how many instructional designers, or actually learning people on the whole, get laid off all the time. And a lot of that's not because they're bad or they don't know their job. It's because they're not proactive enough in learning the business.
Right.
And I think that's one of the key problems in the industry. If you were to counsel or mentor somebody getting into instructional design right at the beginning, maybe right at one of their first jobs, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would definitely have them look at some of the key things that really make it so that you can have success. And I'm going to say this, there's probably going to be people out there that are going to be like, oh, no, because the debate is going around about ADDIE.
Yes.
But to be honest, yes, it's outdated. Yes, I understand your concerns, but show me something better. Mm-hmm. Show me something that you feel is all-encompassing, like ADDIE is. And a lot of people who come up to me, like a teacher who wants to do the transitioning, they might have the experience of knowing how to teach a child and how to present material, but that's definitely one of the things that they might not necessarily have come around in their education. Learning management systems. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a completely foreign word to me 5 years ago. And anybody who's coming straight out of college or trying to do that transition as well, they're like, Well, I know I had to use one, but there's so many different aspects of it,
Hmm.
especially with like Experience API
Right.
and all these the social media integration. And do you want single sign-on? And, do you want gamification? And
Hmm.
so that is a definite beast all in itself.
And it's interesting because the LMS in and of itself is also probably the weakest link in the whole thing. So you have that problem. And actually, which LMS do you use? Do you have one
We're
where
using Absorb.
Absorb? I haven't heard of that one. Um, and I know Lectora has the Coursemo one, which we have worked with a little bit, not a lot, but we have worked with it. I like it because it's simple, and yet it doesn't compromise. So that I like the fact that it works. And I know people who run it. I know, in fact, we had last week on, we had Dave Lukasik, who is the COO and CTO of PSI and Professional Services Industries I think they're out of Chicago, but he's in the Orlando office. And he's a fussy guy. He doesn't like a lot of stuff. He's very fussy about tools and stuff. He actually likes it. I go, wow. He's like Mikey with he likes it. He eats the cereal and likes it. That's him. So if he likes it, it must be pretty good. And I know other people who use it, and they like it too. But you're right. You get out in the field, and they go, here's an LMS. Well, how do I use it? I don't know. They don't even know how to use it half the time. And most people use LMSs strictly to launch a course. There's nothing done afterwards. You launch, you've complied, we're done. It's like, well,
that's something that I'm really passionate about, that I feel that people need to be understanding, that learning isn't just a single item, it's a campaign.
mm-hmm.
I mean, there's proven statistics and research out there about retention, and how many times you need to teach it or how often you need to remind them. And just doing the dump and share, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's not cutting it. I mean, you really do need to have some type of ability to do a follow-up, or make sure you touch base with your manager to see if you got this process or you understand this technology. There's a lot more than just what a lot of LMSs can offer.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually very true. Now, as far as your Lectora work, what are some of your, I guess, favorite features of the product? Things that you really enjoy that just make your work easier.
Oh, I'm a big fan of translations. I know that sounds really, really odd, but the exporting to RTF and the importing, I mean, with everything, there's some quirks, but there's not anything that I feel that, is like, Lectora does it, and they do it right.
Yeah.
And so I was a translation administrator for a while, where I would take those RTFs and get them sent out to a translator and make sure they came back and were reviewed either in the course or as a document, depending on the urgency or the amount of unfamiliar content that would be in there. And it was just something that, unless you work for a large corporate, I cannot say that word, a large company, then it's not something you come across very often. So I was very thankful when I got to have that early on in my career.
Yeah, that's interesting. So were you translating to many different languages or just one?
Yeah, so our base clients, they had like 11 that were pretty standard.
Okay.
But then we were kind of following around up the process of implementing this particular software, and it was a global rollout that happened in waves and milestones, if you will. And I think at one point there was at least a couple core courses that were about 30 on or off, somewhere around in there. So
that's quite a bit. I find the whole thing about translations just sort of interesting and fun. Lectora does seem to do it pretty well. We've never had to do it. We've never had to do a translation project yet. I guess we've been lucky in that respect. There's been no difficulty with that. What are some of the issues you encounter with translation as far as getting it to work right in an e-learning format?
A lot of it has to do with the special characters and the fonts that you're working in. So if you're working in a language that has the special characters, like the tilde in Spanish, then you can run into the possibility of having issues with getting it to render.
Oh, we lost her?
Ooh, are you still there?
Oh, yeah. Well, we lost you.
Yeah.
Did you have, it's almost, you don't have a power outage, right?
No.
It almost felt like we could hear a snap, and we'll edit this out on the video. That was interesting.
Yeah.
I heard like a click, and then you were gone for a second. Oh, actually, I don't know if it reconnected you or you never really lost you.
I reconnected.
Oh, you reconnected. Okay, that was fast.
Yeah. It came up for me pretty quickly, so I made sure and I
full
turned
screen, right?
my video back on, but I'm definitely getting some feedback this time around.
Interesting. Okay, that was weird. And it's interesting because it actually kept you full screen, which is sort of odd. So it was really quick. It was like within a second you came back. We went, uh-oh, what happened there? Okay. That was strange. Let's see. We're okay here? Everything's good. Yep.
I can't see you.
You can't see us?
I see your picture.
Is my camera off? Can you check?
The battery?
How about that?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. The only thing it did is it knocked our camera off. Oh, that was definitely weird. It's like, oh, you know what? It could have been just Skype. It could have been just Skype acting Skypey. We go into a lot of that sometimes. Okay, we are back. Maybe we'll even leave this in so people can see what life is like when you do these things.
There's always got to be something, right?
There's something that just every so often hits you, and literally, where I'm staring at the screen, it's like, whoa, what happened? That's why I thought it was a power outage. And we didn't have an outage, right?
Nope.
No, because I heard like a click, and I went,
No
oh.
outage here.
All right, we're good. Well, anyway, you were talking about the LMSs and what people look at and everything else. Let's talk a little bit about how. Let me get the shots back in here too. There we go. And we are still recording. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure nothing happened on our end. In your experience with Lectora, for example, or it's really just about any authoring tool, but with Lectora, since that's one you use a lot. What things would you like to see in the product? In other words, things that you think would make your life easier.
I
Wish
think
list time.
that a lot of features that people tend to talk about are wizards, and that's just because we want to get things done easily and quickly as possible. And I mean, Lectora's been pretty good about that, where you can at least have that button that prompts you to do those kinds of things. And then the eLearning Brother integration in 12.1 is just like, yes, because then you can plop that in there and get going real fast in that aspect as well. But I keep hearing in the conversations that I'm like randomly having with people all over the internet is that darn timeline. And I don't know if it's because people who are using other authoring tools, they feel like if they transition to Lectora with that timeline that they would learn it better, or if they're just so dependent on it, they're not really sure how else they're going to develop. But the timeline is there. It's just an extra window that you have to open, and but it doesn't necessarily go through everything that's on the page. It's more or less the actions that are happening. But for me, when I'm building something, I've already had a visual plan in my head. And so I know what I want it to look like, and I know how Lectora needs me to be able to configure it in the way to make that work. So, I mean, I don't preview a lot. So maybe that would be, a reason why people would want it as well. But the community and the eLearning Brothers, that completely just blew me out of the water and made everything so much better. There's really not a reason, to at least try it, to see if you like it and if you could, do more things or do better things.
And it's interesting you talk about the timeline, because the timeline works in a more of an animation environment. It's good for animations. It's good for video. The problem is in e-learning, the timeline can be kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you're stopping events, you're restarting events. You have problems when events run out of time, if other events are still going on. It sometimes is not as easy as people think. And if there are bugs in the timeline, as many tools tend to have, then you run into a whole mess of other issues. Captivate in the old days was always very good at having timeline issues. It's gotten better. But in the old days, it was extremely timeline buggy because people didn't understand how the timelines worked, even in video editing. It's much more linear. You don't have to jump and come back and do things. People still have to have a sense of timing to get the timeline to work. You still have to understand where things are, how to move things around, how many layers you've got in that timeline.
Layers. Oh.
And you know,
It took me forever to figure that out because I didn't come from a graphic design background. I didn't come from a video production background.
Yeah.
You know, I just came in from working in a business and knowing that I loved education and I wanted to help businesses with, you know, professional development or whatever other aspects of e-learning that they would be using. And that was one of the biggest things that it took for me was to figure out the layers and then the visibility, the auto hide, that little button. I hate, I don't hate it because it's good to have there. You need it sometimes, you really do. But if you forget that you turned it off, it was just like, why isn't this showing up? What did I do wrong? And you know, you're essentially trying to fix your own, you know, demise, if you want to call it that.
See, I find it funny because there's a lot of talk out there, if you will, of course, by competing vendors and others who don't know the product. And we've talked about this on the show before, that a lot of people think Lectora is hard or difficult or too complex. Now, I've never encountered that. I always thought it was clear cut, to the point, easy to figure out. And there are some nuances like any tool, but nothing was insurmountable. When you first got into Lectora, like you said, not having a highly technical background, did you find it really that hard to learn?
Well, I've always been able to pick up on computer programs pretty quickly. And Lectora's, the way that everything was laid out, I come from even before when they did the PowerPoint ribbon transformation. So before then, it was definitely less familiar. It was definitely more of a tool that you had to learn because it had its own look and feel. But I appreciate the logic. And to me, a lot of the things that they build or they put out there, the menus make sense, and the placement of them makes sense, and the way variables and actions work, that makes more sense to me than other products. And so I think that was a big thing about how I got used to it so quickly, is that if it made sense in my head, then I read it once, I did it once, and it was there. So, and with anything where you're sitting there and you're developing, you have to be able to practice. A 30-day trial is not going to give you a full understanding. And a lot of companies will go out there and say, you know, you have to make a decision in that short of time. So what I'd like to see people be able to do is dedicate that time and not have to worry about other responsibilities or other developments, and really dig deep and see, you know, okay, if I understand how to do this, then, you know, I need to apply it and see if I can figure that out as well. And I think a lot of the little training videos that you were alluding to earlier are definitely going to help, because while the community has gotten significantly better with the ability to tag and use keywords, the smaller videos, I love Inspiration Wednesdays. That's how I learned how to use the product. But you had to commit to sitting there for 45 minutes to an hour, or you had to commit to, you know, being able to join. So having those smaller bits and pieces that are more than just talking about, you know, like basics of what the product is and actually going into more detail, I think a lot of people are going to start really appreciating those.
And one of the things I like from Lectora in the get-go is I actually like the book metaphor. The chapter, section, page. It's just really easy to figure out. If you can design a book or write a book, you can, or write anything, or if you've read a book, you kind of know how it flows, and everything in that, and you know the fact that now you can see thumbnails of a page or the actual outline of your content, I think makes it really easy. And and the other thing you said was logic. it is a very logical program, and even the conditional statements like if, then, and, else, that kind of stuff is actually handled really well in the actions without having to be a programmer.
No, and I've had to do like a little bit of HTML troubleshooting or like just trying to implement little things. My blog really opened up my eyes because I wanted to customize templates and, make the page my own within the restraints of using a particular provider. So when you don't have that background and you're going in there and you don't necessarily understand, how a variable relates to a variable that a coder would be used to in computer science. I really didn't put that correlation together until honestly this week when I read an article about that. And so being able to do that so quickly without having that previous knowledge, that definitely helps.
Yeah, that's true. And if you have any programming questions, give me a call. I'm an old programmer, doing it for a long time.
I keep telling myself I'm going to get into it. I actually rented a book from the library, took out a book from the library, and it's like HTML5 and CSS6 for the everyday use.
Yeah. One of the things, lynda.com has some pretty good courses on JavaScript, like beginning JavaScript, which really, if you look at HTML5, it's just a series of JavaScript libraries that enhance HTML4. And it's pretty cool, but I wouldn't want to code in it. I'd rather just have a tool do it for me. That's why I like Lectora, because it really handles it for you. You don't have to get too often into HTML. Sometimes, but not too often. And even if you want to get into things like the LMS variables, you have access to that.
Yeah.
So at the end, you can say, because I don't know if you've ever had to apply content other people have created for you. For example, let's say HR content or things, libraries that people buy. Sometimes they don't have the right variables in the library, and you can go in and change it, make a quick fix, and now it's working in the LMS because it works on some LMSs, but it may not work in other ones. But Lectora makes it really easy to just make a very quick fix, and now your content works. So
I'm only laughing because passed with a little P and a big P.
Exactly.
Makes a difference.
Yep, completed with a big C, little c, or with a COMP, or the whole word spelled out, and you just go, ah. Yeah. And that's because when they developed the standards, they gave too much. Yeah, I understand why they did that, but from a standard point of view, why not keep it to a standard? Don't give 4 choices for what should be 1. It would have been easier if we just said uppercase C. Then everybody knows that's completed.
Right.
But instead, there's 4 or 5 different options. It's like, And then you have to figure out what your LMS supports because they're all different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call it interoperability hell. It's not quite what we think it is half the time.
It's called come use our support team.
Yeah, exactly. Now, speaking of support, how often have you had to call support from Lectora? Do you find that you can do most of it pretty much just by playing with it and maybe going to forums or just figuring it out?
We had a couple instances, but I mean, it really depends on what browser you're using. I'm Internet Explorer. While I'm going to miss you, I'm not going to miss you. Because the last company that I was with, we had a whole bunch of different programs, and they were all required to be at an old version of Internet Explorer. And when you get into outdated technology, and you have this company that's trying to move forward and trying to resolve issues, I mean, you really have to be a browser champion. And to make sure that you don't need support, or you don't need somebody to look at your course and be like, this looks completely different than what I thought it would. And it all has to do with uploading it and getting it into the right viewing area. And that's one of the things that I wish just this random technology would come out where you could click this button and it would make somebody else at your company just use that one browser when they clicked on the link. You know what I mean? Because then this is how I want you to look at it. Now you go look at it and you tell me what you think.
Yeah, I think it's almost a crime when you still see companies on IE6 and you just go, really? I mean,
Eight.
really, are you that afraid of the world? Um, how many years has it been? I think we're on IE 11 now.
Yeah.
And by the way, 11 actually works pretty well.
Yeah, 11's not that bad.
It's a nice browser considering. It's not too bad. Previous versions, 8, so. I mean, we went to one client one time, and I've told this story, but we went to a client, we showed up with the course, and we played it, and nothing worked. And we went, our eyes opened up wide. Everything was, the backgrounds are missing, things are out of position. We went, what happened? And somebody told us wrong, and they were on IE6. Fortunately, Lectora came to the, Trivantis actually came to the aid, and they gave us a snippet of code that made it work in version 6. I went, oh, thank God. Because that was painful. We're in a conference room with about 6 people, and they're going, yeah, it looks really crappy. Yes, it does. And I'm looking at the person I'm with, and we're kind of going, what happened? And it was a browser issue. It was totally incompatible with 6 the way it was out of the box. Fortunately, there are fixes for that, but these are things you really shouldn't have to go into. And normally we wouldn't. We always ask what kind of browser they have. But even then, you run into browser issues. Now, one thing good, Trivantis has done a good job of adding that to Lectora so that you can target browsers, and they add the code now. And we really haven't had a lot of browser issues with Lectora in a long time. But
Me neither, but I really feel like it's because we transitioned over to Chrome. And I feel
Interesting.
like Chrome can handle e-learning better. And that it
I think we may have lost your signal.
the one thing that really threw me for a loop was all of the things that have come up with mobile users.
Yeah.
And undone playing not being able to work anymore, and how to work around that logic. That
Yeah.
it kind of broke my heart, but at the same time, like, I understand, I really do, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, now we need to make sure we have something to be able to handle situations where the customer wants that.
That's true. And the funny thing is, everybody talks about mobile, but the frank reality is, if you even have 10% of the companies doing mobile, I'd be surprised. There's still security issues. There's still problems with getting things outside firewalls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We work with a lot of large banks and financial institutions. You can't get mobile on most of them, except on the consumer end, not the internal worker end, because of the firewall issues. So, and then you have cross-domain issues where you are different from where your servers are, and you may not get your LMS scores correctly. So these are all little issues that, yeah, mobile is great, but it's also greatly a pain at times. And so the pundits are creating, I always said mobile was a solution for a problem that has not yet been created. So it'll get there eventually, but we're not there yet. When we have our little communicators and all that, maybe we'll be there. But I think we're not quite there yet. Give it time. Though I did not get a chance to go to the Lectora user conference this year. Did you see the stuff that was done on responsive?
No, oh, I heard about it, and I'm excited to see more, but I did not. So
yeah, it looks like it's pretty cool, and it's very well done. Well, John's a great developer, so I'm sure they've got some great ideas on how they do it. And again, I know people who went there and they told me it was just mind blowing. They go, "Wow, that just worked beautifully." So I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I think that's not far from being released. So we might see that. I'm pretty sure we're going to see that this year, right?
Yeah, because they were talking about betaing it out to the Lectora online users.
Okay.
Fall, right?
Yeah.
Fall, yeah.
Fall. That's good. So that'll be fun. That's going to be fun to see, and that might open some doors to some pretty exciting developments. I'm looking forward to that. I know people who've developed websites in Lectora, which is sort of fun. They actually developed a whole website with mobile, because you can do it. You can literally do it. It's funny because people forget it is actually a true HTML development tool. It's not that hard to go from e-learning to a website. So kind of an interesting concept. Well, Jenny, we really appreciate you coming on today. We look forward to having you on again in the future. And can you tell people how a good place for them to get a hold of you is?
Well, you can always find me on Twitter jvalley0714. I would be more than happy if you have a comment, question, you need to get a hold of me. If you can do it in 140 characters or less, go for it. Otherwise, comment on my blog. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm kind of an open book. I'm all over the internet. Put in my name, and you're going to be able to find me.
Sounds good. What's your favorite social media source?
For e-learning, I really like Twitter because of the
Interesting.
Learn chats,
Okay.
and
Yep.
just the ability to be able to kind of share multimedia. And I mean, the 140 restraint kind of sucks, but I mean, it is what it is, and you can work around it.
But it is a great exercise to make you really speak succinctly.
Right.
I think it's not bad, actually. I think people, especially when you have very verbose people, like some instructional designers can get extremely chatty.
Yes.
And you have 200 words when you could say it in 10. It's like, hey, Twitter would be good practice for them. So, all right, good. Well, we've put up all your information on screen at different times. We'll also put some of it in the show notes. And again, really appreciate your time coming on today. We wish you continued luck and success with the blog. You're doing a great job for the community too, so we really appreciate that. And again, thanks for coming. It's been great meeting you too.
Yeah. Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. And for all you people watching this recording on YouTube, please subscribe and like it or dislike it. Preferably like it, but if you have to dislike it, fine. Just give us a reason why. But we look forward to seeing you more, and we really appreciate you watching the show. So we'll see you next week on LectoraLIVE. Thanks, Jenny.
Bye.
Bye-bye.